Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this little video and this particular subject that I personally found very particularly interesting. And I've already talked about this topic quite a few times, but because it seems that this fight is very possible this year, and on top of that, I thought that this particular video, in my view, would bring certain things that I thought would need to become to light, or that I thought that I would have to bring to light, at least my perspective on things. I thought that it was the perfect video to do. But anyways, once again, we're going to be talking about the Vasyl Lomachenko versus Devin Haney fight that could potentially happen this year. Now, I've not really heard, at least in my personal, hearings or, with anything that I've seen as of late, I haven't really seen that this fight has really been 100% confirmed, but more than likely, from what I hear, I keep hearing reports and rumors that more than likely this fight is going to occur, especially somewhere around May. Devin Haney, I believe, wanted it earlier, but Lomachenko wanted it a little bit later. So I believe that more than likely is happening a little bit later because I think Devin Haney wanted it either this month in February or next month in March. But as it appears right now, more than likely that's not going to end up happening. But anyways, in this video, we're going to review a video by Boxing Ego. I thought it was very particularly interesting because he's going to bring up what former sparring partner of Vasyl Lomachenko, Mr. Shakur Stevenson, who in my opinion is one of the top 10 pound-for-pound fighters in the world, he's going to be giving his opinion on what chance does Lomachenko have in the Devin Haney fight. And in his personal opinion, Lomachenko doesn't really have that much of a chance against Devin Haney. In fact, to quote Shakur Stevenson, I believe he even went as far to say that he believes Devin Haney is going to smoke that of Vasyl Lomachenko. He believes that the fight is not even going to be close. And what I'll say is this, and a lot of people may not like me personally saying this, I understand Shakur Stevenson's perspective, because if we're really going to go there, and this is just my view of things, I think that Lomachenko, really to be quite honest with you, I think that he has about a 20% chance of actually winning the fight against Devin Haney. And to be quite honest with you, that's being a little bit generous. And some people may say you're being a little bit too harsh towards Lomachenko. You're not giving him that much of a chance. You're not giving him his just due. Listen, at the end of the day, and I'm going to explain my reasoning throughout the video, the last fight that I seen Lomachenko win against Jermaine Ortiz, I seen the same flaws that I seen in the Teofimo Lopez fight. Now, who knows? When it comes down to that, could have been because he was off for a year, but I seen the same exact thing against Teofimo Lopez, a guy that clearly was having a little bit of a problem against a bigger, lengthier guy, and a guy on the know that was decently skilled and willing a little bit to exchange it with him and use his size and his power against him. And it appears that Lomachenko has a little bit of an issue with that, which of course you expect that to a certain degree. Because to be fair to Lomachenko, he's not really a natural 135 pounder. Now, of course, Ego is one of the guys, and you're going to see in this video, to where he does not agree with that assessment, that he does not agree that Lomachenko is not a natural 135 pounder. But all these channels, like that of a Boxing Ego, Dante's Boxing Nation, 78 Sports TV, they've all pretty much went with that narrative because they want to make you believe that Lomachenko, it doesn't have anything to do with his size, that he's just very overrated in terms of what they said that he was as a skilled fighter. And what I'll say is this: if you're comparing Lomachenko to that of a Floyd Mayweather Jr., if you're comparing him to that of a Manny Pacquiao or a Muhammad Ali, and I understood the comparisons at the time, but this is why you have to be very careful. Many people early on, they love to make these comparisons and then they end up looking foolish a little bit later on because that fighter or that particular athlete did not end up accomplishing anywhere near to what they thought they were going to. Pretty much the same with Anthony Davis in the NBA or Odell Beckham Jr. in that of the NFL, or and we've all had moments like that in sports analyzations. If you have just watched sports, period, we've all had that one time to where we said, you know what, this dude is going to be the next Tom Brady. This dude's going to be, better overall than Aaron Rodgers. He's going to be this. We've all had that one overall, maybe a couple times where we said this dude is going to be greater than this guy, and it didn't end up happening. But it just is what it is. But anyways, Boxing Ego is going to talk about it in his personal opinion, what chance Lomachenko has in the Devin Haney fight. I thought it was interesting. Let's get straight into it.
Devin Haney smokes Vasyl Lomachenko. Lomachenko looked terrible. That's to Shakur Stevenson. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I am back with some more boxing. 2023 is about to be a phenomenal year. Shakur Stevenson did an interview.
I really hope that it is a phenomenal year, especially for boxing. We really have so many great potential fights that are potentially on the way. I hope that Deontay Wilder versus Andy Ruiz ends up happening. I hope that Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk ends up happening. Lomachenko versus Devin Haney, if that fight can occur. And I'm also trying to think of another fight that might be potentially good. Naoya Inoue, of course, versus Stephen Fulton. That'd be a great fight. And there's probably a few others that I'm personally forgetting. Canelo versus Dimitri Bivol, or if he can't get the Dimitri Bivol rematch, of course, either a Jamal Charlo or a David Benavidez or a Demetrius Bubo Andrade, one of those guys. Or if he continues at light heavyweight, at least fight someone that is going to be very decent. But we'll see. We'll see what Canelo Alvarez, we'll see what his future plans are. Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence. Let's hope that fight ends up happening. Virgil Ortiz versus Staniosis. There's a lot of great fights this year. A lot of great fights. Josh Taylor versus Teofimo Lopez. This really has a great potentiality year. So we'll see what happens.
And he talked about a potential fight with Devin Haney, Lomachenko, and just his overall thoughts on Lomachenko. He did an interview with Ringside Views. Shakur says, and I quote, "I think Devin Haney smokes him. He probably jabs him all night, moves and right hands. He's going to outbox Vasyl Lomachenko. I just think that Devin is too big and too fast." Shakur continued by saying, "Lomachenko is too small for 135 pounds at this point, I feel like. And he's getting older. In his last fight, he looked terrible to me." End quote. Now, old media is not going to like that. Shakur Stevenson, who sparred with Lomachenko, says that basically he's too light and he's going to get smoked by Devin Haney.
Listen, what I'm going to say is this. In my view, Devin Haney wins this fight. I'm not going to say that he wins it by knockout because Devin Haney does not appear to be a knockout artist, and Lomachenko is very defensively responsible. In my opinion, he still is one of the top fighters in the world. He's still one of the top 15 pound-for-pound fighters in the world. And once again, a lot of people are not going to like, my analyzation, but it just is what it is. I've been saying this ever since I possibly heard about this fight being announced. I was not really that thoroughly impressed with Vasyl Lomachenko's last performance. I just wasn't. Now, of course, he was off for a year. He is getting a little bit older. Who knows what all the possible factors were? Who knows? You never know what can happen in sports. Maybe Vasyl Lomachenko, maybe he'll get in that ring and completely shock me. Maybe he'll shock the world. Maybe he'll go in there. Maybe he'll knock Devin Haney out. Maybe he'll win the fight 9-3. Do I think that there's a great chance of that happening? Absolutely not. That's just my personal opinion. The thing that I seen Lomachenko in the last Jermaine Ortiz fight, I do think that he is a bit small for 135. Now, he's not a midget. He's not someone overall that is super duper small for 135. But Devin Haney is a guy that is a very big 135 pounder, probably someone who should naturally already be at 140 pounds. He's barely making it as it is. So the fact that Lomachenko already is probably at least a natural 130 pounder, at least at this point in time in his career, and on top of that, he's fighting a guy that probably should be naturally at 140 pounds, I just don't see it happening, in my personal view.
Listen, my thing is this. I agree with most of what Shakur's saying, but I'm not.
And just as I said, Boxing Ego, of course, does not like the alleged excuse of, well, Lomachenko's too small. I don't really think it's an excuse at all. Once again, there's a difference between a valid excuse and something that is an invalid excuse. What a valid excuse is, and it's not always great to use excuses either way, but what a valid excuse is something that actually could be valid, something overall to where we say, okay, that makes logical sense. A big part of the reason why Devin Haney may have an advantage over Lomachenko is combined with his skill and the size, because it's very obvious. I mean, people are going to say, oh, well, I'm not letting him off the hook like Boxing Ego is about to say that. Well, dude, listen, at the end of the day, the reality is that Devin Haney is a guy that right now probably should be at 140 pounds. Lomachenko very clearly has usually been outsized 90% of the time at 135. He was smaller than Richard Comey. He was smaller than Jorge Linares. He was smaller than that of, what's his name? Jose Pedraza. The only one that he really wasn't smaller than was Anthony Crawler. That was really about it. He was smaller than Nakatani, and he's going to be smaller than Devin Haney. He's going to be outreached by several inches. He's going to be the shorter man. He's going to be the guy, all in all, that is not going to weigh as much. It just is what it is. There's no reason to deny the fact. I understand why Ego is, trying to get it out there because he's saying, here we go again, old media and his fan base, they're just going to make excuses to why he lost and blah, blah, blah. Listen, all that is understandable. I understand where Mr. Ego is coming from, but it's obvious that Devin Haney is clearly bigger. There's no denying it. The man has a 7-inch reach advantage over Lomachenko. He's probably about 1.5 to 2 weight classes bigger than him. It just is what it is. There's no denying it. However, if you're coming from the perspective of, well, listen, a lot of people were saying this guy was on the level of Mayweather, of Roy Jones and Pacquiao. So I don't care overall what your size is. Unless you're outsized by 3 or 4 weight classes, the size difference is not that enough overall to where, if you're going to be compared to those guys, to where that excuse is valid. If you're going to bring up something like that, that's a perfect point. But to say that, I'm not letting him off the hook, he's not smaller. No, he is very clearly smaller. There's no denying it when it comes down to it. Like people were trying to say with Canelo and Dimitri Bivol that, oh, there was no size there. Yeah, yes, there was. All right, it just is what it is. Yes, there was. It clearly was. But you certainly can argue that Lomachenko, even with his size disadvantages, that if you're going to compare him to those people, which people in the past have, that he should have performed a hell of a lot better. Because there has been certain fighters like a Canelo or that of a Mayweather or that of a Roberto Duran in the past or a Manny Pacquiao to where they were clearly outsized and they still ended up winning the fight.
Lomachenko off the hook. The thing I definitely disagree with that Shakur said is, quote, Lomachenko is too small for 35. I don't buy that. I don't subscribe to that. And I don't see that.
No, of course you don't see that, but what you do see is allegedly Deontay Wilder having this dent in his head, and apparently overall Deontay Wilder being cheated by Tyson Fury because allegedly he had this egg weight in the glove and he was poisoned, all sort of bullshit. Once again, I don't have a huge problem with Ego. I think a lot of the times he's actually a good analyzer, but it's very clear, depending on what fighter that he's talking about, that he has his own set of bias as well. And Lomachenko is not someone that he really preferably likes. It just is what it is. And like I said, I get it. Because a lot of people take a look at him and they say, this was just another white dude on the pound for pound list who was highly hyped up. They were comparing him to Mayweather, and at the end of the day, he got proven overall that he wasn't on those guys' level. I get it. But at the end of the day, that doesn't mean that you have to leave out certain things that are just the facts of the situation. It's very obvious Lomachenko is smaller. There's no reason overall to deny it. It just is what it is. It would be like if you took a look overall at Errol Spence if he were to fight that of a Canelo Alvarez. And if Errol Spence were to lose against Canelo, that's like me saying overall there's someone overall, let's say for example, that's a big fan of Canelo, because I'm not really a fanboy of any of these fighters. There are certain fighters I prefer to watch. But, that's like a fan of Canelo Alvarez saying, oh, well, you know what, I don't want to hear that excuse because he went up in weight, and Errol Spence, he was doing fine at welterweight, and, he can beat other possible middleweights, so why can't he beat Canelo, right? But he's fighting a guy that's the creme de la creme. So it is what it is. So once again, there's no use in, denying the size advantage. I know why Ego is doing it, but I just don't think there's any reason.
People keep saying that, and I think Bob Arum,
because it's the truth. It just, once again, Ego, you're not going to convince many people that Lomachenko is not smaller than Devin Haney. The man is outreached by several inches, and on top of that, he very clearly is a little bit small for 135, obviously.
Kind of started this because like Bob Arum, that's his fighter, so he's going to talk him up, and he was saying he's the new Muhammad Ali and all this garbage. He's not. He's nothing like Muhammad Ali. He's Tatiana Ali from Fresh Prince. He's all right. He's cool. But he's not no Muhammad Ali. So Lomachenko, Bob Arum said, oh, he's really a true featherweight and this and that. Look it up. Before Lomachenko turned pro, before he ever had his first official pro fight, he fought over 130 pounds. I want to say 131 to 133. So
yes, but what certain people don't understand is that a lot of the times in the amateurs, I don't know why people keep bringing up this point as if it's like, oh, gotcha. There's many fighters that have fought at certain weights during the amateurs, whether it be heavier or lighter, to where they were not naturally in that same weight class. Like there are certain fighters that fight at middleweight or overall, at light middleweight right now, to where later on overall in the amateurs, they may have possibly fought at 168, possibly even light heavyweight at one point in time. It just happens that way sometimes. At one point in time, Alexander Usyk and Sean Porter, they fought each other in the amateurs. There's no way that fight could happen today. So my point being is this: just because you see someone overall fighting at a certain weight in the amateurs does not necessarily overall mean, oh, well, they 100% for sure are a natural 135 pounder. And on top of that, a lot of skilled fighters, and since Lomachenko, since he has such an extensive background resume, more than likely, if I had to guess, it probably was because he was too skilled for fighters in his own weight class. Lomachenko is one of those fighters. He's a guy that if you pretty much are the same size as him, you're going to usually have a very, very little chance against him. That's why he pretty much was able to dominate Gary Russell Jr. and, pretty much Nicholas Walters. He was able to dominate those guys pretty much to a great degree. They really did not even have a chance against him. It was not really until 135 that we really seen Lomachenko struggle to a decent degree. Now, of course, a certain amount of people may say, what are you talking about? He struggled against Orlando Salido. Why don't you bring that up? Yes, but I don't really know if that's 100% because of Lomachenko's complete deficiencies, at least at certain times, or if that was really more because that was the second professional fight of his career.
Oh, what Top Rank does often is they get fighters to start at a lighter weight and cut more weight than they probably should and can.
Well, that's not something that just Top Rank does, dude. That's something that boxing has done forever. Oscar De La Hoya ended up doing that in the first part of his career. Floyd Mayweather Jr. ended up doing that in the first part of his career. There's a multitude of people that have done this. Adrian Broner did that in the first part of his career. This is nothing new. Now, Lomachenko, when he was at 126 pounds, a lot of those guys, he was a little bit bigger than. Like, if you see his fight against Gary Russell Jr., yeah, he's a little bit bigger than Gary Russell Jr. But if you were to compare Lomachenko to that of an Oscar Valdez or a Nicholas Walters, he's the exact same size as those guys. He's the exact same size as those guys. He is not the same size as Jose Pedraza, as Jorge Linares, and certainly not Devin Haney and Teofimo Lopez. That's just, it is what it is. People can try to deny it all they want to, but those are just the facts of the situation.
Pain at a lower weight class to start out, and then you look at them and they're way too big for that particular division. Plus, if you got some skills.
Well, the only weight class that Lomachenko really was way too big for, or a little bit too big for, I'll say, was 126 pounds. That was really the only weight class. Because at 130 pounds, he wasn't really that much bigger than anybody. Now, of course, at 130 pounds, he fought Guillermo Rigondeaux, and he was a decent amount bigger than him. But Rigondeaux was never really a natural 130 pounder. He was more of a natural 126 or natural 118 guy, I believe.
You're too big.
But because of Rigondeaux, he kept calling out Lomachenko. Eventually, that fight happened.
For the other people in that weight class, plus you're skilled. Like, look at Shakur Stevenson. You look at him, there's pictures of him recent pictures with him and Big Baby Anderson, Jared Anderson, and he don't look mad smaller. He look like he got some size to him,
Yes, because Shakur Stevenson is probably a natural 135 pounder. But I wouldn't say that he's a natural 140 pounder or a natural welterweight. Now, when you take a look at certain fighters like that of a Terrence Bud Crawford, Terrence is an example of someone that I'm not going to say that in terms of weight that he was way too big. But Terrence Bud Crawford, when he was at 135, this is why I say, people say, oh, well, Terrence Bud Crawford, he's moved up to the welterweight division. Right, but that's not really the same as what Lomachenko and what Canelo Alvarez or what Floyd Mayweather Jr. did. Because Terrence Bud Crawford, like a lot of people don't remember, but when he was at 140 pounds, dude, he would balloon up in weight by like 20 pounds. Terrence Bud Crawford would be at 160 pounds on the night of fight night when he was at 140 pounds, possibly even sometimes at 135. Like, not a lot of people mention that. And on top of that, Terrence is a dude that has like a 74-inch reach with 5 foot, with the 5'8" height. So Terrence is pretty much a natural welterweight. He's been a natural welterweight from the start.
The guy who was at featherweight, he was at featherweight, and I'm wondering how he was even making featherweight. In his last fight at 130, he missed weight. So he probably could have came in the game from the Olympics at 130 and then just been now moving to 35. But
as you see there's Jorge Linares, someone who's probably a natural 135 pounder. Lomachenko is not as stocky, nor is he as big or as lengthy as a Jorge Linares.
Put him at 126, or that's where they put him at that specific space of time. And then as soon as he beat Joet Gonzalez, he moved up. Immediately not one title defense. And it's not just Shakur. The same could be said for Lomachenko. When Lomachenko was fighting at featherweight,
But Lomachenko is not as big as Shakur. Their size is a little bit more comparable, but Shakur Stevenson is probably just a little bit bigger than Lomachenko. Like I said, Lomachenko is a natural 130 pounder. All right, so it is what it is. So if Lomachenko was fighting someone like a Shakur Stevenson, this really would be a fight that Lomachenko would have to win. And he still has to win the Devin Haney fight, in my view, if he's going to climb back into that top 5 pound-for-pound rankings. But one could say that Devin Haney, that he very clearly is decently bigger than Lomachenko. It just is what it is.
he was way, way bigger than majority of the people he was fighting. Just look at him in the face-offs. That's all you got to do. Google it, right? So Lomachenko fought over 130 pounds before he was officially a pro, and now he's just now fighting at lightweight, but they had him at 126. Same thing with Mikey Garcia. They had him real light, and then he eventually fought Errol Spence and Jesse Vargas and whatnot at 147.
Yeah, but Mikey Garcia was never a natural 147 pounder. The reason why Mikey Garcia went up to welterweight in the first place really was to avoid Vasyl Lomachenko, which is a fact that a lot of these channels, especially the LDBC and new media channels, don't like to talk about because they still need to use Mikey Garcia's name in order to tear down Vasyl Lomachenko. But the truth of the matter is that Mikey Garcia was afraid of Vasyl Lomachenko. You know, and certain people will be like, oh, what are you talking about? There's a reason why Mikey Garcia, why every time Lomachenko's name was brought up, he'd give people the side eye. That's how you can tell when a fighter is truly afraid of another fighter. Whenever that fighter is brought up, they just seem to get immediately pissed off.
So that's just the reality of it. So I don't subscribe to this whole Lomachenko's too light. I think Lomachenko is who he is, and his style is why he's regressed, because that's not the type of style. Guys that are like not cognizant of the fundamentals and they're more like athleticism and pizzazz and
right, but Lomachenko has great fundamentals. He has great head movement. He has excellent footwork. He has very decent defense. But the thing is with Lomachenko is that he's going to have to be willing to risk it to get the biscuit in these fights. Lomachenko's fundamentals really aren't the problem. His problem, overall, once again, is that he needs to be willing to exchange it a little bit more with some of these fighters. Okay? It is what it is. That's what his main problem is. Fundamentals, in my opinion, have never really been a problem with Lomachenko. There's not really a thing I take a look at him and say, wow, there's something fundamentally wrong here, besides maybe defending to the body. That's probably his main weakness. You know, but besides that, his fundamentals are very good. But what Lomachenko needs to work on is that, you know, he needs to be, well, he's decently defensively responsible, but he's going to have to be even more defensively responsible than what he usually is. He's going to have to find a way to try and get past Devin Haney's jab. And overall, he's going to have to find a way to get in there. And he cannot be afraid of what is going to come back at him.
Ash and panache, that doesn't last usually in the sport of boxing. The reason why Floyd is the GOAT, Floyd Mayweather, is because Mayweather was cultivated in boxing. His uncles, his dad, he's been around boxing. He's been in the boxing gym his whole life. He had fundamentals. If you listen to another one of my favorite all-time athletes, Kobe Bryant, rest in peace, the Black Mamba, he tells you, he says a lot of guys were bigger, faster, more explosive, taller, stronger, and I couldn't catch up to them that way. So I had to hone in on the fundamentals. The fundamentals is how.
Speaking of the fundamentals, let's talk about a comment. Actually, I believe one of my followers or subscribers actually mentioned. This was on my basketball video that I did, I think about a week ago, on a LeBron James conversation. And he asked me, he said, you know, you should do a video about the debate between Kobe Bryant and Tim Duncan. And I'm not really sure if I'm going to do that video or not. I would have to see. But I definitely do like talking about basketball. Listen, if you're asking me personally who was the greater player between those two, it clearly was Tim Duncan. And Kobe Bryant fans, they'll heavily disagree with that. The Kobe Bryant fan base is the craziest fucking fan base I think I've ever seen, not just in basketball history. They're the crazy, besides the Deontay Wilder fan base, they're the craziest fan base I've ever seen personally in my life. I mean, if you overall say anything, in their opinion, derogatory about Kobe, it's almost like a tornado siren goes off worldwide. They just go after your ass repeatedly. They're like ants. They just come out of nowhere. But listen, overall, once again, on a serious note, in my view, Tim Duncan was the greater player. He had more finals MVPs. He had the same amount. Well, I believe, around the same amount of finals appearances when it came down to it. I believe Tim Duncan had 6. What did Kobe have? Maybe 7. But Tim Duncan was 5-1. Kobe, I think, was 5-2. When it came down to it, Tim Duncan had the same amount of championships, and every single one of those championships, he was the leader and the most experienced player on that squad. With Kobe, that was not always the case. Shaq was the greatest and most impactful player in that first repeat. Bottom line, just is what it is. Not even just counting the finals MVPs, but when you talk about what he brought to the table and who clearly that main team was built around, it was Shaq. It just is what it is. All right, not like even a Kevin Durant or Steph Curry situation, or even a Magic Johnson Kareem, where it's a little bit more debatable. There was no debate about that. And when you talk about it, Tim Duncan, you could debate, in my view, was more impactful than Kobe. Overall, his fundamentals were all around great. He wasn't as flashy and entertaining probably as what a Kobe Bryant was, according to certain people. But Tim Duncan was the greater, more impactful player when it came down to it. And probably, in my view, a greater leader. Because you never really heard anything bad about Tim Duncan. And you never heard anything bad about Kobe Bryant, at least usually. Of course, there was that one case in Colorado, but that's neither, here nor there. I won't talk about that. But, of course you heard about other things about him basically being somewhat of a team killer or not the best teammate. And yes, at times I would agree. But anyways, just to talk about that, not to get too sidetracked, I would go with Tim Duncan.
How I started lapping guys, because my game was concentrated on, if I was, all my weaknesses, like, I wasn't a good perimeter shooter. 6 months, he worked on that, right? So it's all about the fun.
Well, Kobe Bryant actually, in terms of his shooting ability, and once again, not to get sidetracked, he was not as efficient as what a lot of people like to say that he is. Like, for his career, he was a little under 47%. If you take a look at other shooting guards for their career, Dwayne Wade, I think, was about a 48%. Michael Jordan was at about a 49%. When it came down to it. And there's a multitude of others like Clyde Drexler, like Kobe, no offense against him, but especially for a shooting guard. And they're not usually always up super duper high. But when you compare him to other players, he was probably the most inefficient all-time great shooting guard.
Fundamentals in boxing no different. The guys who have technical ability, offense and defense, counterpunchers, guys like that who think it's a thinking man's game. They usually have longer careers.
Well, I would agree with that, but what I'll also say about Lomachenko is this. Lomachenko very obviously is a very intelligent boxer, but there is certain things that he does need to work on, and I will agree with Ego on this. His defensive possible style maybe could get a little bit better, to where he could avoid the shots, maybe counterpunch a little bit better. Lomachenko was so used to trying to get those angles overall on certain opponents that sometimes he forgets overall how to counter shots, or sometimes he has a little bit of a problem with that when he needs to. Not that he necessarily can do it, in my opinion, but he does need to work on that. Because if you think that you're going to get the complete angles over Devin Haney, that's not going to happen, dude. It just is what it is. That's not going to happen the whole entire time. You need to be able to get in and out, counter him, and he can still do that relatively well. But can he do it as well as a Floyd Mayweather Jr. or something like that? No. But you know what? You kind of expect that because, once again, Lomachenko's not a super big guy. He's a guy that, in a way, does have to be somewhat offensive because he's a guy that's about 5'8" with natural 130-pounder fighting guys bigger than him at 135, and he has like a 65-inch reach.
Well, Marquez, a counterpuncher, knocked out Pacquiao. He's like 40, 41 years old. Floyd Mayweather, he's beating Canelo when he's 36, 37, and Canelo's only 23 and much bigger. The reason why Lomachenko's looking like Lomachenko is because his style, and as you've been through, he's had a bunch of amateur fights, he's had some pro fights, wear and tear in his body, but he just doesn't have the style to beat bigger guys because of how he's fighting. Floyd fought big.
I'll say this, if you want to say that Lomachenko's defensive in terms of his defensive counterpunching ability, if you want to say that that is also one of his flaws, I would not disagree. Because he really could have countered Teofimo Lopez, in my opinion, a hell of a lot more. When he really could not get the angles, Lomachenko was a little bit lost in that fight. So what I'll say is this. Lomachenko fundamentally all around is very, very great. But there is a couple of flaws that seems to be his Achilles heel. He does not defend super well to the body. And on top of that, in my opinion, he does need to counterpunch, at least overall with certain things, a little bit better. He gets in and outside of the range very well, but there's certain times to where he needs to let his hands go. and that he needs to counter a little bit better than what he's been doing.
Your guys all the time.
Because if he does not, then if he does not see those openings, and allegedly, according to certain people, Lomachenko can see most things, and I do think that he's a boxing genius to a degree, but there's certain things that he does need to improve on. He needs to let those hands go when he gets inside on the range. You cannot wait to get angles against Devin Haney, because you're not going to get angles against Devin Haney. He's a guy that has a 7-inch reach advantage over you. He's going to be very fast. So what you need to do is keep your hands up the whole entire time. Utilize that jab. Try to trap him up against the ropes. Hit him to the body. You're probably going to take a few here and there. You're going to have to eat him. You're going to have to deal with it. And then on top of that, overall, you can try to use angles if you want to. Overall, you can try to catch him off guard, but you can't wait for Devin Haney just to be in a position to where he cannot hit you back at all. And that is the main weakness that I really see with Lomachenko. He's not too comfortable sometimes with guys that are willing to exchange 100% back with him. That's not me always saying that he's never been in a fight to where people haven't exchanged with him. I've seen it in, against Jorge Linares. I've seen it in that overall against Jermaine Ortiz and a couple of others. But against Teofimo Lopez, for example, he was very uncomfortable. So I'm going to have to see it against Devin Haney.
And see, the reason I got to create this distinction is because people were saying that Floyd would lose to Lomachenko, and now old media is trying to switch it and have a safe place to land for Lomachenko, because just like all the
I would agree with that.
old media fighters, they prop him up, put him on all the pound-for-pound lists immediately. Meanwhile, they won't put Devin Haney, Jermell Charlo, Shakur Stevenson, Andre Ward. They won't put these black fighters on the pound-for-pound list. Or,
well, I really don't know what the hell you're talking about there, because 3 out of 4 of those fighters they put on the pound-for-pound list. I mean, to be fair, they didn't put Devin Haney on there for a little bit, but they have him on there now. They put Shakur Stevenson on there as soon as he beat Oscar Valdez, so I don't really know what the hell that's supposed to mean. And they always had Andre Ward on there, so I really don't know what the hell you're talking about there. Now, are there certain examples of black fighters that should have been on there that were not on there? Yes, absolutely, but I'm not really sure if you want to bring those up for examples. Now, Jermell Charlo, I've already told people this. He's not on my top 10 pound-for-pound list either. Jermell Charlo is probably the most overrated top 10 to top 15 pound-for-pound fighter in the world today, either him or Lomachenko.
they're hesitant to put Lomachenko and Triple G and things at number 1, and then when they start showing signs of regression, they come with the comfort food, and they want to put them in the boxing hospice and find a safe place for them to land and come up with all these excuses as to why they look like that. But
well, I certainly understand where you're coming from. When it comes down, and that certainly is not a bad analyzation. However, that does not mean that Lomachenko is the same size as Devin Haney. We must distinct overall what is a true invalid excuse and what is a valid excuse. When you talk about overall, like let's say overall, people say, oh, well, Gennady Golovkin lost to Canelo Alvarez because he was old. No, that's not really what happened. What Gennady Golovkin overall showed against Canelo was that he was not the complete boxer that Canelo Alvarez was. If you're talking about Lomachenko against Teofimo Lopez, or the reason why Lomachenko ended up losing against Teofimo is because of the shoulder injury, blah, blah, blah. Listen, I didn't hear anything before it. I didn't want to hear anything after it. Period. Point blank. When it comes down to it. So I agree with Ego on that point. But a lot of the times with these LDBC and new media channels, because they're so racially motivated, and they see everything from an attacking point of view, and I get it to a certain degree, because sometimes it's not always a bad, perspective to have, is, to see other people's motives, but you must realize, once again, what's a valid excuse and what's an invalid excuse. Like when you talk about when Ego was making those excuses for Deontay Wilder, stuff that had no evidence whatsoever, that's an invalid excuse. But when you talk about, say if someone tears overall a bicep, or someone very clearly is smaller, like when Roberto Duran lost to Marvin Hagler, I could sit here and say, oh, well, you know what, Roberto Duran, he took the fight, and I don't want to hear any excuses because he beat Sugar Ray Leonard, blah, blah, blah. Right, but Roberto Duran very clearly was smaller than Marvin Hagler. Roberto Duran was a guy that started out naturally at 135 and was a natural 135 pounder. He was just stronger than everybody else. That's why they called him Man to Stone. So when he fought Marvin Hagler, who was a natural great middleweight, all-time great middleweight, he ended up just losing the fight from what I heard. So once again, we must know what is a valid excuse and what's an invalid excuse.
Meanwhile, I've told you the same thing about Lomachenko since the beginning. He's a good fighter, respect to him, but he doesn't have an unbeatable style, and that's evident because he's been
I would agree.
beat multiple times and arguably lost his last fight. That's why Shakur is probably saying he looked terrible. And
Well, let's be real. If Lomachenko had melanin in his skin, you'd say overall that Lomachenko won the fight.
he doesn't even have 20 fights, and he really should have 3 losses. So
No, he should have 2 because he won the fight against Jermaine Ortiz. Once again, it always makes me laugh. These same guys like Ego and these guys, they're like, oh, I judge fights overall very, very well. But then apparently the Tyson Fury Deontay Wilder first fight, they're like, oh yeah, Deontay could have won that fight. Jamel Charlo against Brian Castano, oh, that was that I thought it was a fine scorecard, even though Castano very clearly, in my opinion, probably should have won that fight. So once again, it's no offense against Ego, but even though I think he can be a very good analyzer, and I agree with some of the points that he's making, he's not 100% to be trusted either.
that's just the reality of it. Let me know what you guys think of Shakur Stevenson. I agree with the other stuff. I would definitely favor Devin Haney to beat Lomachenko.
I'm favoring Devin Haney as well.
And, I'm not going to make no excuses either. Devin Haney beats him, blazes him.
Well, you have no excuse. If Devin Haney ends up losing to Lomachenko, what excuse are you going to have? There's no valid excuse. The dude is two times bigger than Lomachenko, or at least a decent amount bigger than him. On top of that, he's younger. He's the guy on the know that, you claim is more skilled. I personally believe, actually, at least in certain regards, that Lomachenko probably is the all-around more skilled player. However, it's kind of like the comparison between Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. Just because someone looks better doesn't mean that they're going to be greater or that they can perform in the bigger moments. Aaron Rodgers can throw a football in a way that I've never been able to see Tom Brady, overall be able to throw a football. But Tom Brady can always perform in those big moments. He knows what to do. Aaron Rodgers sometimes overthinks it, or he has certain deficiencies overall, especially mentally in certain moments. Will Lomachenko do that against Devin Haney? We'll see what happens. Because one thing I'll say about Devin Haney is this, that he has over Lomachenko. He knows when to put the gas on. He knows when to overall let his hands go. So we'll see what happens.
It's just what it is. He was better than Lomachenko. And old media is not going to like that. Subscribe to the channel, The Best in the Business. I'm out. Introducing.
But anyways, that's really about it for today. We'll see overall what ends up happening. But I do agree with Ego and Shakur Stevenson. More than likely, I just don't see Lomachenko winning this fight. And I hope that I'm wrong. I'm hoping that the fight is somewhat competitive. But I just don't personally see it. Lomachenko, once again, he's going to have to be really ready to be in an absolute war in this fight. He's going to have to lay it down all on the line. Is he going to be willing to do that? I don't know. He didn't really show that in the Teofimo Lopez fight. And there were certain times in the Jermaine Ortiz fight to where he didn't really show that either. And he's going to have to try to fight tooth and nail against Devin Haney, in my opinion, almost every single round. Maybe in the first half of the fight, maybe all in all, you can maybe take a little bit of a break for a few rounds. But Devin Haney has excellent stamina. He's bigger than you. His power more than likely is going to affect you in a certain way. So Lomachenko cannot afford to cost himself many rounds. But we'll see what happens because, of course, you don't want to gas yourself out either and possibly get stopped later on. So we'll see. But this is going to be a very interesting fight, possibly if and when it does happen. But that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.